Welcome to another Better Place Australia podcast. How can a single mum with 3 children pay the bills when she is a victim of family violence, has reduced income and gets no child support payments from her ex-partner? Tammy is a senior financial counsellor for Better Place Australia and Financial First Aid. She de-identifies and shares the story and how she assisted the single mum.
Client presented to me. She had separated from their ex-partner probably about 12 months ago due to family violence.
Right.
And she had 100% care of 3 children. And those children have been diagnosed with different medical needs.
Okay.
And she was experiencing a fair bit of economic pressure due to the medical needs, as well as unfortunately her own, she did work a little bit casually, and she was going to need to have an operation, which meant she couldn't go back to her work for maybe 6 to 8 weeks, which was further going to impact her finances. And her ex-partner wasn't working, and as often is the case, those ex-partners provide very much in the way of child support. So from their own Centrelink, it'd be minimal if it's like not even $20 a fortnight. So very difficult situation for the client.
Wow. How did she find out about our service?
I believe she was referred by a family violence support worker.
Right.
Because the client had mentioned that they had these outstanding bills, which they just had no capacity to pay.
Yeah. What steps do you take now when you get such a massive case like that?
Yeah, and safety is always the first thing. We talk about safety in physical sense,
Yep.
and their own mental health safety. So we check in, are you getting supports? Have you seen somebody about the family violence? And they indeed had. And they were receiving supports, and they did feel safe. There was an intervention order in place, and now it's about moving forward with their life, And unfortunately, they had these debts, which arose because the ex-partner didn't contribute when they were together. I mean, that was part of the family violence, is often economic abuse.
Right.
And that person was in the household, yet all the utilities were in the client's name, including the lease, and they are expected to pay everything, and the other person didn't contribute at all. And even moving on from that relationship, they've still got these debts in their name. And as you can imagine, this person is still paying ongoing rent and ongoing utilities, now just herself and the 3 children. And she's saddled with this debt that from the previous place, and just had no capacity to pay it. It's day-to-day was very much a stress and had ongoing effects due to medical concerns. And so, we go to the utility provider.
I was just going to say, is this where you go to them and say, hey, listen, we need a debt waiver or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. We go to them and we highlight what the client's experiencing. We provide the budget, their current ongoing, and also we really do put some information in there that really, because obviously, figures don't tell the whole story, of course.
Yeah.
We need the story in behind that, with the client's permission about what we share and don't share. I don't provide intervention orders, copies of that or anything like that. That's not necessary. But it's more about, this is the client's situation. You can see from this that she can't afford the debt.
Yeah.
But these are also the other things that have impacted this person, and requesting that waiver on family violence grounds, financial hardship grounds, and compassionate grounds. And fortunately, the providers on the whole are very good at considering those sort of circumstances. And in this case, they waived more than $2,000 worth of debt,
Wow.
which was from gas and electricity.
What about future bills? I mean, we've waived these, but what about when
the next one's come up? Yeah, good question. So for this client, there would be available a utility grant relief. So that is a grant that gives $650. You can use $650 until it's all used up, as long as you're eligible each time you apply. And this time the client was eligible under family violence grounds. So she did have a gas and electricity bill, and we applied the utility grant relief for that. But so it's gas, electricity and water.
Okay.
Now, water bills when you rent don't tend to be too high, but in these client situations, single mums with 3 children, every dollar counts. Every dollar counts.
Yeah.
And we empower the client to do that themselves, because what will happen is each time the bill comes through, they can keep applying until they've used that $650. They don't have to come back to us each time. So we might do it with one provider, in this instance with their current electricity provider, and then they know how to do it for their gas when their gas comes in. So you can't apply until the bill's overdue, okay? So literally the day after it's due, you can call the provider and say, I would like to apply for utility grant relief, and I'm impacted by family violence, but also this client's accommodation costs were more than 30% of their income, which is another criteria which they would have met as well.
So how do they go about once they've used all that grant?
So once they've used that, the options that we then talk about is going on payment plans and contacting the utility company and asking, what would your ongoing costs be? And they can work out from their previous use approximately what it could cost them fortnightly. So they can then go into a payment plan, usually under that usage amount, okay? Usually, let's say it's $100. They often can't afford $100. So we offer what they can afford. It does have to be a reasonable amount, but a reduced amount, and they can pay it fortnightly, because especially with some people, when they come to us, they only get their electricity every 3 months. Now, that's too hard to budget. I personally get mine monthly because it would be just too big.
Yeah.
So we do suggest fortnightly is a good way, and they can get this agreed payment plan. They can either have it direct debited out of their bank account, or it can come out of their centre pay via their family tax benefits if they wish, and they can cancel at any time as well. They do have control over that. But the purpose with that is to ongoing keep paying, so they don't have to stress about it. So there's the 3 things. It's getting debt waivers from previous households which they can't afford to pay,
Yep.
applying for utility grants, using them as much as we can,
Yep.
and once that's used, moving on to, some providers call it smoothing
Okay.
plans. They smooth out what your payments would be over a year, and that can provide relief. And sometimes they offer little incentives as well. They can say, okay, if you make 5 payments, we'll pay one of them. Sometimes they'll offer that. And every time we call up, when I apply for utility grant relief with a client, or I advise them to, always ask the question, are you on the cheapest plan? Because inevitably, they'll offer you something better.
Yeah, right.
It's not often, in my experience, that they say, oh, no, you're on the best plan. Usually, the client hasn't checked in for well over a year or longer, and there is a cheaper plan. They can also go on to the Victorian Compare website, the Victorian Government Compare website, not any other website, and they can put in their details from their electricity account. And what will happen is that state government site will come up with cheaper plans. And you can check to see if you're on the cheapest plan. You can do that yourself, and you can swap providers if you wish to do so. And I recommend you should do that every 12 months. I recommend everybody does it every 12 months, because there's no benefits for loyalty with energy companies,
Yes.
okay? In fact,
yeah.
if anything, there's a loyalty tax.
Yeah.
It's always better, like with your insurance, always check every 12 months to see if you can get a cheaper deal, especially with the cost of living. It's incredibly important.
So you help the client with all of those steps?
Yeah, I always ask the client what they feel comfortable doing. Each time checking in, would you like me to assist you with this? Would you like to do this? Or telling them before we call the energy company whilst we're in the session, I conference call them in. I say, we need to allow an hour, because it takes a while to do the utility relief grant application.
Yep.
They're going to ask for about terms and conditions. And then if we're then going to check on whether you're on the cheapest plan, there's also a lot of discussion about that and terms and conditions about that as well. So it does take a while. Sometimes clients say, look, I know what to do now. I'm happy to go ahead and do it myself. And I always say, if there's any problems, just call me back and I can assist you through it.
Did you assist her with the rent by mediation with the landlord or anything like that?
No, she was okay with the rent.
Okay.
That was getting centre paid. So she had set up a centre pay to pay her rent, which is a great way of doing it, because often sometimes you can overestimate what's in your bank account. All right. And if you've got direct debits coming out and things like that, all of a sudden you fall yourself, you can fall short.
Yeah.
So it is always a good idea. It can be a little bit tricky with centre pay because rent tends to need to be paid monthly by a certain date. So you have to kind of work out your payments, but it is really a good way of doing it and make sure that that gets paid, because really we do say that accommodation costs such as rent or mortgage need to be pretty much the priority.
Okay.
And there's also advice and referrals to any emergency relief providers in case the client would like to access them for food vouchers and things like that as well. We always provide a summary email back to the client saying, your utility grant relief will take 6 to 8 weeks to process. They've put the account on hold. Don't worry about that. Here's your budget that we filled in so you can see what's going to come out. And then here's some other places that you may wish to access for relief.
So it sounds like a good outcome. I'm sure she was rapt that you were able to help her.
She was. She actually didn't think they would waive the debt. We always have to say, look, it is up to the discretion of the creditor to waive a debt.
Yeah.
Okay, it is up to their discretion. So we can't guarantee that that's what's going to happen, but we try. And if they don't waive the debt, then they come up with maybe $10 a fortnight or something like that, an affordable payment plan.
Yeah, right.
But in this instance, yes, the debt was a relief, which was it's one less stress for this person, especially with her operation upcoming and her concerns about all that, her own medical needs.
That's Tammy, Senior Financial Counsellor for Better Place Australia and Financial First Aid. You can access free financial counselling from Better Place Australia if you live in a funded area in Melbourne or Geelong. Now, there's a long list of suburbs that this applies to. So to find out if you live in a funded area, visit the Better Place Australia website or the Financial First Aid website and do a search for funded areas. Financial First Aid is an initiative of Better Place Australia.